Okay, so hello and welcome to this tutorial in which we're going to be discussing the user cost of capital. We're going to look at the definition, we're going to describe the formula, and then we're going to use this to answer two past exam questions. One will be the one from 2011 Zone B short question 7, and the other one will be 2010 Zone A short question 9. Okay, so first of all, let's define the user cost of capital. So the user cost of capital is defined as the total real cost of owning 1 unit of physical capital, which we are used to labeling as capital K, as a percentage of its value. Okay, and we denote the value as PK. Okay, so let's think about all the things that are going to affect the user cost of capital. Okay, and there are three things basically. So I'm going to give the formula and then we're going to discuss each in turn. One is going to be the opportunity cost, which is the interest rate. One is going to be the depreciation, and the final term is going to be changes in the value of capital. Okay, so the interest rate, and note that this is the real interest rate. The interest rate is the opportunity cost of holding capital, of owning capital, because if instead of buying 1 unit of capital, we were to buy 1 unit of a government bond, for example, then the interest that you would get on that would be this little r, and so this is the opportunity cost of holding capital. There's another cost to owning capital, which is that because of the wear and tear associated with the use of capital, capital is going to depreciate over time. Okay, so the depreciation over a given period of time is going to also add to the cost of owning capital. And then finally, changes in the value of capital also contribute to the user cost. Okay, why is this so? Well, because if the price goes up, for example, tomorrow, then the value of having this asset is now, the value of this asset is now much larger than it was before, and this is something that's going to decrease the user cost of capital, right? So this is not a typo here. Note that this is indeed a negative sign here. So increases in the price of buying 1 unit of capital are going to decrease the user cost of capital because they increase the value of capital. Okay, now you know that on the other side of this, the benefit of holding a unit of capital is the marginal product that it gives us in the production of goods. And so in the neoclassical theory, we're going to accumulate capital until the marginal product, so until the benefit of having 1 unit of capital is exactly equal to its user cost. Okay, now let's have a look at answering some questions. So question 2011 B7 says the following. If the marginal product of capital is always positive, then the real interest rate cannot be negative. Okay? So we're asked to discuss whether this is true or false, and then to explain the answer. Okay, so we start off by saying that the marginal product of capital is always positive, and we know that this is true. Remember that in neoclassical theory, the marginal product of capital is a decreasing function of the amount of capital that we hold. So as we have more and more capital, each extra unit of capital increases our production by some amount, but it's increasing this at a decreasing rate, which is why the marginal product of capital is negatively sloped. And you can see that the marginal product of capital, here we've drawn it, is indeed always greater than zero, because our assumption is that even when you have lots and lots of capital, one extra unit is still going to contribute a positive amount to your output. Okay, so is it true that if the marginal product of capital is always positive, then the real interest rate cannot be negative? That is, it has to be greater than or equal to zero. Well, one useful way of looking at this would be to apply our user cost of capital definition, and if we abstract away from price changes for a minute and assume that the prices over time, the price of capital over time is going to be constant, then we can just write the marginal product of capital equal to the interest rate plus the depreciation rate. Okay, now this means that the interest rate, the real interest rate, will be given by the marginal product of capital minus the depreciation rate. And so from here you can already see that there's going to be a problem with this argument, because you can see that even though the marginal product of capital is always greater than zero, there's another term that's going to pin down the real interest rate, and that is the depreciation rate. So if the depreciation rate, which is positive, is large enough, right, so if this is quite a big number, bigger than the marginal product of capital, then actually the real interest rate can be negative. Okay, so the answer to this question is false, and one thing that you should note, and this comes back to a point that we discussed in the previous tutorial, is that this is the real interest rate, not the nominal interest rate. So this doesn't have anything to do with the rate of inflation. What inflation is doesn't come into this analysis, because remember, for investment decisions, the interest rate that we're interested in is the real interest rate. Okay, let's have a look at the other question. That's going to be 2010 A9. The expectation of a rise in the price of capital goods increases the user cost of capital. True or false? So let's start by writing down what the user cost of capital is. Well, we know that the user cost is equal to the opportunity cost, which is the interest rate, plus the wear and tear, which is going to contribute to depreciation, minus, remember I was very explicit about the fact that this enters negatively, minus the price change in the price of a unit of capital. So you can see that if price increases from one period to the next, that's going to imply that delta pk is positive, and an increase, so a positive delta pk, is going to lead to a lower user cost of capital. Right? Does this make sense? Well, think about it. If I bought this unit of capital yesterday when it was relatively cheap, then the user cost is going to be quite low, because today the price is much higher, which means that if I sell it today, I'm going to make a gain because of this increase in its price. So indeed, when the price of the unit of capital goes up, that decreases the user cost of capital. So the statement, the expectation of a rise in the price of capital goods increases the user cost of capital, is false, because actually it decreases the user cost of capital. Okay, so make sure you understand each term of the user cost, and make sure that you can explain why each of these enters into the user cost of capital.